The Palace of Falkland in Fife is rightly described as royal, for to this day, as it has since 1437, it remains the property of the sovereign. But the palace is also an integral part of the borough of Falkland that surrounds it, and which contains so many historic little houses. While Falkland was a hunting palace for the Stuart kings and queens, their days weren't entirely given over to the pursuit of deer and wild boar. As devout Catholics, they worshipped in this magnificent chapel dating from the reign of James V. His daughter, Mary Queen of Scots, lived at Falkland and prayed in this little chapel, where services are still held today. The portraits in Falkland Palace are some of the most important and valuable in the Trust's care. Here there are pictures of so many of the ill-fated House of Stuart, including Mary Queen of Scots. Charles I is particularly well portrayed, including this magnificent Van Dyck, one of the great paintings in the Trust's care. Charles, like his tragic forebear Mary, lost his head, while others perhaps more deserving of the fate kept theirs. Ninian Crichton Stuart is the current keeper of the palace and the village.
The heritable captain, constable and keepership of the palace was something that came into being, in a sense, at a time when the Stuart kings stopped to come here regularly, and the keepership became the right to look after the property for the monarch. When my father took, at that time, the fairly radical step of asking the National Trust to become involved in the palace and look after its maintenance, he decided in practice to give them responsibility for looking after the palace and to keep it wind and watertight and to be responsible for the fabric, but retained the formal keepership. In practice, that means that I'm consulted when the National Trust are looking at making significant changes, and certainly have, I think, a very real voice there. But by and large, the National Trust are the people who take those decisions.
Members of the Crichton Stuart family have quarters in the palace, which has occasionally led to tensions with the Trust representatives.
I think inevitably there are tensions, and those tensions can at times, I think, be creative, and at other times they can be difficult to live with. I think going back 10 years, there were times when senior management would be less willing to listen, and certainly in my perception that's changed for the better.
Snow was crusting the village rooftops when I first visited Falkland, but I couldn't resist coming back a few weeks later when the palace garden was in bloom and Wimbledon was on the television for a peek at the oldest tennis court in Britain.